So we will get started in a minute or two. And it looks like a lot of folks who live and work in Baltimore. We have about 77% of our poll says that they live and work in Baltimore. There we go. So welcome everybody. And I'm actually going to have another poll in here while we get started. All right, Brian, I think we can go ahead and get started. So thanks everybody for joining us for our, this is the 11th year that we're doing Baltimore data. It was supposed to be data day, but we have converted it to data week, just given the situation that we're all in now. And I'm going to stop sharing this one for a second, and I'm going to jump over to my slides. I jumped over too fast. All right, everybody can see this now? All right, here we go. So we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, and this is the 10th year that we are bringing people together to learn not only about what we do, but what so many other people do to provide data to all of our communities. So we welcome all of you to our first session of 20. We have 20 sessions on the 20th of July for the 20th anniversary, and we have so many people to thank. Obviously, all of our staff, you'll see their names throughout this week. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask any of them. Cheryl Knott, Logan Schertz, Robin Lewis, Carlos Carpati, and Kyle McDermott. Thanks to them for putting all this together. And I truly want to thank our summer intern, Priya Kanyabonina, who knows literally every single detail this summer for putting together Baltimore Data Week. This year, for the first time, you're going to hear much more about our data science fellows, Michael, Brian, Ruth, and Naomi. Thanks to them also for helping make sure that this week goes off with as few hitches as possible. Thanks so much for the University of Baltimore and all of the support we continuously get. Jared, for all of your technical help. Kristen and Allison at the library. Of course, Dean DL is going to be here in a second. Thank you, Dean DL, for all of the Dean's Office support. Thanks so much to all of our sponsors. The Annie E. Casey Foundation, T. Rowe Price Foundation, PNC Bank, Green and Healthy Homes Initiative, Maryland Department of Health, Kaiser Permanente, and Fulton Bank. All of this is made possible because of your generous support. And this year, we did not do this alone. We've always had, for many years, we've had the Federal Reserve Bank be our partner in Baltimore Data Week. But this year we have Hack Baltimore, Be More Map Time that Cheryl Knott is a part of, and Moss Labs actually literally curating specific sessions for all of us. Part of the 20 that you'll see, they actually put together. All of our panelists and moderators and workshop leads are all volunteers. We really, really appreciate the amazing set of people that were able to join us for Baltimore Data Week and thank them for their volunteer time with all of us so that we can learn from each other, even though we're doing it in a social distance way this year. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us for this kind of exciting occasion for us, and hopefully a great learning experience in Baltimore this week. So I'm going to turn it over to our Dean, Dean Murray DL. Thank you so much for joining us, and he'll kick us off with some welcome remarks.
Well, thank you, Seema, and welcome to the 10th annual Baltimore Data Day. All right, as Seema mentioned, it's actually a week, but it's a very special week because it's also the 20th anniversary of BINIA. And when you look at the topics we'll be covering and the quality of the presenters, I think you will agree with me that we lay down a very special mark this week for the next 20 years. So at UB, we're very proud to host BINIA. As our president, Kurt Schmoke, always reminds us, we're not only the University of Baltimore, but we're the University for Baltimore. Now, I'm not a native of Baltimore. Some of you may have guessed this. But I have learned in the last 60 years, last 6 years at least, how important neighborhoods are to Baltimore, and how at UB, we are placed in a very special location, straddling east and west and midtown between south and north. So over the years, BINIA has cemented our connection with your neighborhood and businesses. BINIA unites us with our community. So this is especially important today. At the Merrick School of Business, my colleagues and I have been asking what the world of business will look like post-COVID-19. I recognize that also my colleagues and our students, our neighbors, are also asking how much longer systemic problems of racism, poverty, and injustice have to exist. And I tell them, I do not have the answer. But I also tell them that I see the opportunity, because experts like myself will not be able to provide the solution. Solutions will only come from grassroots efforts of people working together at neighborhood level, then city level, and eventually nationwide. And that is where BINIA comes in. These community efforts will be fueled by data, and it will propel the actions that will create the post-COVID-19 world, and a nation that finally works together to overcome systemic problems. So my hope this week is that there will be at least one session that helps you develop actions that will further help your neighborhood and our city. And thank you again to our sponsors, our partners, our volunteers, our panelists, our moderators, and our workshop leads who have provided immense help for this week. And thank you, everyone who's attending this. Thank you for being our partners. Thank you, Seema.
Thank you so much, Dean DL. So just so you see who's a part of this alliance, we take the word alliance very seriously. The poll shows kind of the breadth of folks that are interested in the data. Neighborhood folks in our neighborhoods themselves, and then everybody that cares about our neighborhoods, which is a broad range of folks. But as you know, Dean DL said, I do want to take a moment and acknowledge the moment that we're in. All of us at the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, our hearts are with anybody and everyone in Baltimore and around the world directly and indirectly affected by COVID-19. You're going to learn a lot about kind of how we're trying to track that, but this is new for everybody. This is new for all of us. And, you know, we understand the moment that we're in. And even though all of us are together right now to be a part of this session, we know the situation that we're in and take it pretty gravely. We also believe that Black Lives Matter. We do this work so that we're actively dismantling structural racism in our city, and we want a more just and equitable city. That's why we do this work. And we wouldn't do this work if we didn't truly love our city. We do it with a passion because we want the data to be used, and we want the data to be informing how we move forward as a city. So I do want to just acknowledge the folks that may not be here this year. Baltimore Data Day is generally an in-person event with more than 350 people. And we have lots of people that come every year. We have regulars, believe it or not, from our neighborhoods that come and network with us and join us. And we have lots of hugs that happen at Baltimore Data Day. And we are not going to be experiencing that this year. So we are making sure that everything is available after the event as much as possible. Recordings will be put on our website. Any slides that we have will be available so that anybody that wasn't with us here in this synchronous moment will have access to it later. But the other thing, like making lemonades out of lemons, we do know that many of you are new and many of you have probably never heard of us before. And so we welcome you to be a part of our family this week and hopefully join us in the future as you see kind of things impacting your own work. So we know that this is an unusual year. We acknowledge all the folks that are not with us this year and welcome all of you that are new. So this is our 20th year, so let's go back to 2000 for those of us that remember what 2000 was like. The Ravens won their very first Super Bowl in 2001, January 2001, based on the 2000 season. If all of you remember, the Y2K was the big news coming into 2000 that we thought the world was going to end back then. And The Wire hosted its first season in 2001, I believe. So The Wire was brand new to the scene that unfortunately marks the city of Baltimore today. This is way back 20 years ago. In the city of Baltimore itself, CityStat was a new model and Bina was created at about the same time as CityStat. And it was actually created to be the counterpoint to CityStat. CityStat would be data internal for city agencies and Bina would be external for communities and other foundations that needed the data. For those that don't know, Baltimore is the first city in the nation to start a 311 system. And Bina was the recipient of a lot of that data starting in 2000. For those of you that were in Baltimore 20 years ago and may have been part of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance when it was first created, this is the very first vital signs report that came out, and it was a hard copy, and people actually flipped through it and thumbed through it. You'll see that today it is an electronic copy, or electronic version on our website. But all of these resources are actually at the University of Baltimore's library. The Bogomolny Library houses a lot of the archives of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance in case anybody ever wants to go back and see why we were created, who created it, the people that were involved, and all of the artifacts that we've collected over the last 20 years. So thanks to our library also for making sure that this is possible. We were one of the first partners in the National Neighborhood Indicators Network. This is a group that's housed at the Urban Institute in Washington, DC. We were the 6th partner back in 2000 when we joined. Cleveland was the first. And today there's 30 cities that are a part of a network that we are learning from so that we can bring best practices to Baltimore of how to get information in the hands of communities. And this is what we do. This is our signature product, the Vital Signs Report. It has over 110 indicators. We just issued during this pandemic, the 18th edition, which is 2018 data, which is the latest available data for us to produce for you. And we're going to talk about that intro, but there are a lot of good stories to say for the last 18 years of collecting data. Many of them have to do with health. So teen birth rate, we didn't have elevated blood levels in 2000. We got it a little bit in the middle. The crime rate, believe it or not, was much, much, much higher in 2000. The median sales price was much, much, much lower. So we have some really good stories to tell using 20 years of data. Particularly that teen birth rate has consistently come down since 2000. The crime rate has come down, but you'll see that it was actually pretty low starting in 2009. So it hasn't really budged and it's actually inched up a little bit. And the median sales price today is much higher than it was in 2000, but we know that in the middle was the housing market crisis. And so for better or worse, Vital Signs has been tracking all of these trends. You can see the height of the housing market was 2006 in terms of sales price. So even though we have these good news stories and we've been doing the work of issuing the vital signs every year, it's so clearly not enough. This is the very first vacant and abandoned housing map for those that are not familiar with Baltimore. You know, this is East Baltimore, West Baltimore, going up into Park Heights, where we have high rates of vacancy. But notice the range was from 0 to 22%. And when the uprising in Baltimore happened in 2015, our map hadn't really changed much. So the range in 2015 actually went from practically 0% up to 35%. So the worst had only gotten worse, even though many neighborhoods had stayed stable. And again, for those that don't know where we are, the University of Baltimore is right in the middle of town. And the CVS that erupted into flames is not far at all, less than a mile from where we sit and where our offices are. So this hit close to home for multiple reasons, because the question is, we saw these maps for the last 15 years. How come we aren't doing enough to change these maps? And so starting in 2015, we decided that we should have a framework, even though we're going to issue 110 indicators because so many people want us to do that. We do need to have a framework for why we say certain indicators are key indicators. And that's what this talk is going to be about. And this goes back to going back to our roots, looking at our mission, why BINA was created to begin with. Yes, we were supposed to measure progress, but if you look at our original statements, it's to hold us all accountable towards that progress. And when I say hold us all accountable, BINA is a part of that. BINA is a part of making sure that we as a city are held accountable using the data to move forward in progress. So we had to decide in 2015 if we were going to be an organization that led with a point of view, a data-driven point of view, something that can then be used with our own analysis, and the point of view can be substantiated with our research. And that would be new for us. And I think for those of you that are researchers, this is new for possibly researchers to kind of stick your neck out with a point of view. But just because you have a point of view doesn't mean that you're not objective, right? Having a point of view doesn't negate objectivity. So we took a lot of synthesis of our research. There's a couple of things that came out exactly in 2015 that you might want to take a look at that happened to be extremely relevant in that moment. And we started to engage with that point of view and worked with the Housing for All Coalition to make sure that the referendum for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was actually passed, with a whole group of people that came together in the city to try to make change. So if you're going to lead with a point of view, you have to make sure it's a sustainable point of view. And we choose the data to be the voice of neighborhoods themselves. People can go from neighborhoods, organizations can come and go from neighborhoods, but the neighborhoods aren't going anywhere in the city, and our data is reflected consistently for all of our neighborhoods. Neighborhoods cannot be separate but equal. We will never have an equitable society if we continue to see the level of disparity that we have with our indicators. And I guess our point of view is that the disparities that exist in the neighborhoods themselves are at the basis of every other disparity that we might care about, from racial disparity, health disparity, education disparity. So we are in the business of trying to eliminate neighborhood disparities so that we can get to the elimination of so many other disparities. And in order to do that, it's not enough to issue the vital signs report. You have to go what I call upstream in the decision-making process. By the time we see the maps, that's the outcome. You have to go upstream to the decisions that led to that outcome if you want to have any kind of influence on changing those maps. And when we see decision makers, yes, elected officials are decision makers, but so are community-based organizations, business associations, advocates, and the media are all involved in making sure that we have a just and equitable city. So from this kind of leading with a point of view, we have a framework for our key indicators, and that's been slowly kind of honed in over the last 5 years. And we have these questions that hopefully will be useful to all of you as you go forward. So the universal question for any neighborhood, no matter where you live right now, you can actually think about your neighborhood if you're staying at home, for example. you have a fundamental question to ask. Are people moving in or are people moving out? And at any moment in your neighborhood, one of these two things is true. And if you don't take a helm of that, so many other things that you care about are going to go. So that's the first universal question. And then to answer that universal question, we have 4 goals for every neighborhood. We want to increase housing diversity and affordability in every neighborhood, reduce or maintain vacancy rates below 4%, ensure access to and mobility within our neighborhoods, and then measure connectivity. So I'm going to go through each one of these 4 objectives now. So let's talk about population decline in Baltimore, because it is absolutely our existential crisis. And this is Baltimore alone. We are the only East Coast city that is continuing to lose population. So some of these cities had a history that was resembling Baltimore back in the past, right? You know, New York City was almost in bankruptcy in the 1970s, for those that remember that. Washington, D.C. was the murder capital of the United States in the 1990s. But all of these cities that are our sister cities along the East Coast, along I-95, are all turning themselves around with respect to population. So why can't Baltimore? So we're the only East Coast city that lost population in the last decade, which of course is a major plug for sessions that you're going to see during Baltimore Data Week to make sure that you and all of your neighbors have filled out the 2020 census, because this is the only way that we know the best population counts for our neighborhoods is during the actual decennial census. Everything else is a proxy or an estimate or our best guess, and we try and we think we know, but not until that enumeration do we actually know how many people live in our neighborhoods. And it's such a critical indicator for everybody because it has such a diverse impact on neighborhoods. So even though the city of Baltimore lost 5% in the last decade, it wasn't an even 5%. This gets to this idea of kind of the tale of 2 cities. We have lots of places, particularly out here in the West, which I'm going to concentrate on, that all lost population. And then you have things going down the spine here. And then the green areas are the neighborhoods that grew between 2000 and 2010. Whoops. So clearly not every neighborhood is experiencing the same phenomenon just by looking at this one indicator. Sorry, my mouse died for a second. Obviously, there are unfortunately racial implications for this just by looking at one indicator, population decline. A lot of the neighborhoods that declined in population are unfortunately high African-American population. There's a session tomorrow on housing with Alan Malik that's going to go much, much deeper into this particular topic. So if you're interested in this, I highly recommend that you attend that one. But this idea, as Dr. Lawrence Brown coins as the black butterfly, we have the wings of the city that are predominantly African-American and the spine of the city that are predominantly white. So that even just that simple indicator of population loss is unfortunately impacting neighborhoods of color right now. So we also just issued a report last week that you might have seen that noticed the declines in home ownership in the Southwest side too. Now, some of these neighborhoods are actually predominantly white, like Morrill Park, and some of these areas are out here that are predominantly African-American. But the result is the same. We all have a similar fate. Home ownership is declining dramatically in the southwest part of town. Again, if you want to go to the housing session tomorrow, there'll be much more information about that topic. The other indicator that's brand new for 2018 that has these implications for the southwest part of town too, this was new for us. We know that we have an opioid addiction crisis, an overdose crisis in the city of Baltimore. And notice where we have high rates of 911 calls for overdose emergencies. And the pattern coming down into that southwest part of town is pretty stark. So all of these things might be interrelated, right? Population loss, home ownership loss, and then the need of the dependency on something else. So if that is our fundamental issue of population coming in or coming out of your neighborhood, because essentially every neighborhood is competing with every other neighborhood for people, for potential residents. The question is, do you have diversity in your housing stock? It's not just housing for all, it's for housing for all in every neighborhood. And can we truly get to that? So we recommend that you look at 3 different indicators. The first being, what is the change in owner occupancy? And it's not about one particular number or another, it's about change. So for example, the city of Baltimore is here in the black. We have a neighborhood that I'll show you is relatively stable, but it's Midtown. It's roughly 40%, less than 45% owner occupancy and lots of renters, just given the type of housing. But the key is that it's stable. Look at Edmondson Village, which is out in the west side, and the dramatic decline in owner occupancy just in the last 10 years, last 8 years. That kind of change, such a dramatic change, a 10 to 15 point change in a neighborhood kind of changes the character of a neighborhood. It's not to say that renters or homeowners are bad. It's just if you change that fast, the flavor of the neighborhood changes, and that's what neighborhoods tend to not like, right? Or not prepared for that kind of change. So the rent affordability index is, of course, kind of the opposite. So Midtown has kind of decent affordability. It's lower than the citywide average for people that spend more than 30% of their income on rent. But notice what's happening here in Edmondson Village. Even though owner occupancy is going down, rent affordability is going up. So that means more than 30% of the population in Edmondson Village are spending 30% of their income on rent. And notice that now Edmondson Village is our highest neighborhood to do that. And if you're spending that much money on your housing, 70% of the households spend more than 30% of their income on rent. You're not spending it on the main street, and you're not spending it in the small businesses that are in your neighborhood that are so critical for neighborhood amenities. And that's the reason why this kind of unaffordability is a problem and what we want all of our neighborhoods to start to track. And then the final one is, is it even possible to own, to rent, and then to use on the private market the subsidized housing voucher? Midtown has a small amount of ability to use the voucher, but notice in Edmondson Village it's going up. And then we have this other neighborhood called Canton that there's practically no ability to use a housing voucher in Canton, which means that that whole segment of the population does not have the ability to live in Canton right now because it's not an option. So looking at these 3 indicators together, because they're interrelated, is what we want neighborhoods to make sure that you have diversity, you have stability, and that you have diversity across these things. And what can you as a neighborhood do? The next one is, of course, vacancy. This is real estate 101, right? If you're not occupied, you've got a problem. And because we've lost so many people in our neighborhoods, we have the vestiges of prior population in our vacant and abandoned housing. The 2 indicators that we suggest to track for this in your neighborhood is the actual vacant and abandoned boarded up housing. That's this on the left. And you can see where we have a lot of that. It's concentrated in a few neighborhoods. The other one, though, is to look at where the post office is no longer issuing the mail because nobody's picked it up for the last 90 days. And that becomes a little bit more further flung. Every neighborhood knows which one of their properties is empty. The city may not know it because there's no code violation on it, but you'll know it if your next door neighbor has not been living in that house, even if they happen to be maintaining it. What you want is people to be living in that house because that provides social capital, that provides all kinds of safety measures in a neighborhood too. The third one is around accessibility. The neighborhoods in our region are like the muscles, and our transit and transportation system is like the arteries that bring all kinds of good stuff to our neighborhoods. And when you don't have those arteries coming into neighborhoods, we start to atrophy. So these neighborhoods are the ones that grew between 2000 and 2010, all along the middle and out here on the east side. And notice that they are directly along one of our interstate highways. So this is I-83 coming down the center. This is I-95, I-895, and 695 down here in the south. And notice if you have an interchange in the city of Baltimore, you actually have a structural advantage. That's not to say that we need more interchanges, but we need more ways for people to circulate so that all kinds of people will start to come into these areas on the west. And that's one of the reasons why we're advocating, even though we are not an advocacy organization, but using the data, we want to show that the high travel time to work is a big problem for attracting people into our neighborhoods. So notice that on this west side, we have such high travel times to get to work because it is actually difficult to get to either a transit stop or a highway if you're using a car. What's ironic in a lot of the data that we put out is the juxtaposition of neighborhoods right next to each other. So the 45-minute commute time is highest in Southern Park Heights and lowest in the neighborhood right next door, Medfield, Hamden, Woodbury, Bennington. That kind of irony is such a shame because it means that people are literally experiencing a totally different life living right next to each other. And if you're thinking about workforce training projects in Southern Park Heights, we have mentioned to the neighborhoods to think about making sure that those workforce training are for places that are close by. Because if you're spending so much time away from your neighborhood in the commute time, you can't attend the parent-teacher conference. You can't come to the community association meeting and do all of those things that actually make all of our neighborhoods strong and resilient. The converse, of course, is this drive alone. We have a problem with the city obviously not having a very strong transit system, and so people unfortunately rely on their cars. So some of the areas, for those that are not familiar with Baltimore, the outskirts of town tend to be pretty low density, but the middle of town is very high density, and we still have a lot of drive alone to work right in the middle of our town. So Canton is the third highest neighborhood to drive alone to work. More than almost 81% of folks that live in Canton. And for those that are familiar with Canton, we know that this is a very dense kind of transit-rich area, transit by bus, not transit by fixed rail, but it does have transit there. And this seems more about the lifestyle rather than the actual access. But getting in and out of the neighborhood, there has to be destinations too. It's not just about getting to work, it's about having people come into your neighborhood and having kind of people use the bus system as a way to kind of make sure that you have real access to the entire city and that your neighborhood is viewed by lots of people. So this is a new indicator from last year that we're now starting to track with the NTA as our partner on bus loadings in the city. And believe it or not, this is actually one of the top reasons why people have said that they leave the city. We hear all the time about taxes and school quality, but we did a focus group back in 2014, 2015, and access to a thoroughfare was actually one of the reasons why people stated that they left the city, because they needed better access to the region and realistically better access to either I-95, I-83, or 695. And if you see where new housing starts occur, they occur along those highways as well, until we get a better transit system where all of our neighborhoods can truly be connected. So connectivity is the last kind of objective. And this is the kind of stuff that you can't see. How connected are our communities? Because we know that connectivity is not just about the node, the thing that's there to connect you, but it's all the permutations of connections that that node represents. And if that node isn't there, then none of the permutations are there either. And it's those permutations that bring us knowledge, that bring us people, that bring us skills, that bring us all kinds of things that we maybe can't quantify, but if you don't have that connectivity, it's just not even there. It's that, you know, infinite versus zero distinction. So this is why we need to measure connectivity. This is about using the data, not just to understand where we've been. I showed you a lot of 20 years worth of data, but also to reflect on where we're gonna go, predict into the future. Cities and neighborhoods are unique, but complex adaptive systems. And so we can use data for prediction using this kind of complex theory. And because we know that there's these predictable network effects. Once you get that node, that connection, once you get more of them, the level of connectivity becomes exponential. And this kind of quick diagram is a way to think about it. If you have 2 users on the internet, you have 1 connection. If you have 4 users on the internet, all of a sudden you got to 6 connections. And you can see the exponential connectivity just because there's more nodes in that area. So how do we get to this? Obviously, we want to look at things like, this is actually new data from the American Community Survey that came out last year, looking at % of households with no internet at home. Unfortunately, if you saw the pattern of vacancy, this is unfortunately very similar. This west side of town going up into Park Heights, and then the east side of town too. We know that 22.1% of households do not have internet access, which of course is such, has become so evident why this is such a major problem right now during COVID-19. And going back to what I said earlier, leading with a point of view, we know we want to start measuring connectivity. It's relatively new for us. And so we have to let people know that we're even doing it. It's not just obvious that we're doing it. We have to actually communicate that we're doing it. And so we were one of the early folks to be a part of the Baltimore Digital Equity Coalition, which is a loose group of about 60 people, 60 organizations. We are a proud member of that from the very beginning, because we want to make sure that the data can be used to actually address digital equity so that everybody has a way to learn and work, not just now during COVID-19, but also long into the future. Another way to be connected is, of course, getting access to capital. So this is data thanks to the 21st Century's initiative at the Johns Hopkins University. They are collecting data now that we are working with them on an annual basis to see what kind of small businesses are getting access to capital. And notice, again, unfortunately, broad swaths of our western part of town that are not getting capital. And then notice kind of, again, neighborhoods right next door to each other that have these huge variations. So we did work thinking about capital investment. We did work with the city planning department, which I invite you to take a look at this report that we issued last year on the equitable distribution of capital investment, and making sure that if you have capital investment, that might spur this kind of small investment by private institutions as well. So that is a super quick overview of Vital Signs 2018. I'm going to stop and take some questions, and then also do a demo of our website, because we normally do a whole separate session on our website, but we've been doing it weekly. So I will just do a quick overview for those that are not familiar. And just to reflect on kind of where we're headed. If you haven't taken a look at the entire week, we are happy to answer questions of which sessions you might really want to be a part of. And hopefully when I went through my talk, you could see why every day is connected to work that we've been doing over the past year, and what people asked us to kind of prepare for them. So I am gonna stop talking and stop sharing, and my staff can let me know if there are any questions, or if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question while I move over to the website.
So we don't have any questions right now in the chat. There we go. Thanks, David. We have one now. Do we have data related to schools?
Great question. Yes, we have an entire education section. It is our most secure data, and has been the biggest challenge for us in our stay-at-home orders to be able to actually analyze that data. When we are able to get back into the office with a routine, like some time to actually look at that data, we will be issuing the Vital Signs 18. So up until we have all of our education data in to 2017. And keeping data secure is actually kind of one of the biggest reasons why we're at the University of Baltimore. This kind of work is very challenging. VINIA, for those that are familiar, used to be a standalone nonprofit. And the level of security that we have to have on the data is pretty challenging for a nonprofit to kind of keep track of. And so the University of Baltimore assumed VINIA back in 2006, 2007. And a lot of the tech support that we get to make sure that our data is secure comes from the university.
So the next question, does Bina have any data related to healthy food access?
Yes. So we do have an entire health section, which maybe I will show you how to get to that. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to open up and we have an entire session on food security, which maybe we can send you a link to that to make sure that you know how to get to that. So let me jump over to our website. Everybody can see this? Okay. So yes, when you come to our website, we have 3 ways to access the data. If you want to see it by neighborhood, which is the first way, if you want to see it by topic, and so a lot of the healthy food data is in this children and family health, or if you just know exactly what indicator you want to get, you can just do a keyword search right here. So for example, if you wanted to look up if we have any food, you can do a keyword search and you can see the kinds of information that we have related to food. This is actually a good example, just like the capital investment that I showed you, of working with an institute that is doing primary research on this topic. We cannot possibly be doing primary research on every single topic that we cover. We are about neighborhoods and bringing data to neighborhoods. We're like a data integrator. And so we're lucky to be in Baltimore with Johns Hopkins University. Johns Hopkins Center for Livable Future provides both of these indicators to us when they run their healthy food analysis. So this is the same data that the planning department and the city of Baltimore uses, but it's packaged to our community level so that you're looking at the same data. One of the reasons why we make sure that you're not looking at various versions of the same thing, you're looking at one version so it's coordinated so that we can actually make progress towards some of the things that we care about. The other thing to let you know that all of our sessions from today will be available on YouTube. So we have a whole channel. And we did do, since we've been at stay at home, we've been doing these Wednesday webinars. We have, I think, 5 or 6 in here about how to access a lot of our data, how-to guides on our open data portal as well. What's another question?
Okay, Mike asks, does 22% without internet at home mean no broadband access or no internet of any kind?
The way that the question is worded is no internet of any kind, but you could have cellular. So that cellular would be considered separate. There's another report that, again, on Thursday, John Horgan is going to be talking about a report, the difference between wired access and cellular-based access or hotspot Wi-Fi access. And there's huge distinctions between who has wired versus who doesn't. So I encourage you to go to that session on Thursday to learn more about John Horgan's report.
Okay, we do have another question around data. Do we have any data around access to healthcare?
We do not have, who has primary care access as an indicator. No. I am looking at the chat too.
And then another question related to environmental justice, data around green spaces, clean air, and water.
Yes, we have an entire area around green space. Again, and if you look at our sustainability section, and if you go into any one of our topics, you'll see all of the available indicators and all of the definitions for these indicators. So percent area covered by trees, which is why Wednesday is all about the environment and climate, in case you can join us for that. We have things like who's calling for dirty streets and alleys. We have a sanitation issue in the city of Baltimore. And then every single one of our indicators has a map associated with it. So you can see the reason why we pick our indicators is because there's such variation in almost every one of them. So looking at how different indicators impact different parts of the city is why these maps are the way we visualize data. I will also show you kind of how to get to indicators in general. So let me go back to our main page and look at, I'm gonna just pick an indicator. What was one of them that was asked? So if I do, what's a good one that I should do based on what people are asking? I'm just going to do crime rate, just because I think that's the first one that I saw. So if we do number of common assaults, and if you hit go, which is how many people call 911 to record a common assault, what you'll get is how many years available of that indicator, where we got the data. All of the data comes, we have pretty good relationships with all of our city agencies, and what the topic is, a little bit of the metadata, and then different ways to look at it. So the first, or the default way, is a tabular data, which you can then sort as you need and then copy as you need. You can look at it in terms of bar charts, which obviously shows you huge variations in common assaults. And almost every single one of our indicators has different kinds of neighborhoods and different kinds of variations. And then you look
just
trends.
because after this is city of Baltimore only, so we don't understand what's going
And then we look at kind of different neighborhoods as a visualization for you. So you can see different neighborhoods and how they're related to the city of Baltimore. And then the final way to look at any one of our data is, of course, the maps, the famous maps that Cheryl puts together. And these are available for you to take a look at as well.
So Seema, would it be possible to do a quick demonstration of our open data portal? We had a question about how to actually access that data.
Yep, sure. So I'm back at our homepage, the BINA homepage, and I am going to go into this vital signs area and open up the vital signs open data portal. So all of the data on our main website is meant for folks that really just want to explore our community-oriented, probably have a question that you want to ask and kind of know how to get to that kind of answer. The open data portal is meant for developers, folks that really, researchers, people that want to dig even deeper and do their own analysis beyond what we've done on our website. So this is new this year, our open data portal. Or was it last year? Sorry, last year, but it's new the way it looks this year. And you can basically do everything that you did on our main website, but do it here on the open data portal. So you can either, again, you can see that the same icons for the sections are here as well if you know you want to go into crime, or if you know that you want to just search for an indicator. Let's do life expectancy. So I'm going to click on life expectancy, which happens to be in our health, because in some ways life expectancy is the most important indicator, right? It's the ultimate thing that we're after to make sure everybody has a good life expectancy. So when you come into our open data portal, you will get the map and an overview of what's in the data. So having an explanation about what it is, again, the years available, and then all kinds of attributes associated with it. So if you wanted to just do some quick descriptive statistics, and if you clicked on 2018, you would get a pretty nice histogram for everybody that remembers what a histogram is, to see how many neighborhoods are at different levels of life expectancy. Uh-oh, sorry, that didn't work, but it will probably sometime today. And then the other way is, of course, to click on the map and you can see different areas and see what the life expectancy is. And then finally, you can look at the data itself. So you can look at all of the data across all of the years and filter the data if you need. And every single one of our indicators is represented here on this open data portal. So you can see if you wanted to filter, I want to just look at neighborhoods that are between 65 years life expectancy and 70 years life expectancy. It would filter the data for you, not only here in the data table, but also in the map. And I just see that Herbert just asked this last question. We are about in a 14-month lag on data. So it's the, did I pick out literally every neighborhood? No, there's only 15 neighborhoods that showed up in this range. And then if you wanted to download the data, you can either download the full data set as it was before I filtered it or just the filtered data. So we're in about a 14-month lag for data. And so the key is for us is really about looking at trends for neighborhoods, being able to show you where we've been so that you understand why we're here right now. We are not the kind of immediate data. That would be the city's open data portal for a lot of these, not all of these. And the Census Bureau has a lot of information as well, which again, we have a whole session for the Census Bureau on Wednesday. So if you're interested on that, please take a look. The other thing I want to also mention is that we have a lot more resources on our website than just vital signs. So all of the research that I mentioned that we try to synthesize to get to our key indicators. If you want to join us for learning, if you actually teach and you want to use the data for teaching, and then all kinds of news and other help center things that you might want to use in the future. What's another question?
Well, so this is one I can also answer. So Tom just asked, does downloading it, so downloading an indicator, just download the specific indicator or the entire database? So rather than type out a response, on our open data portal page, we do have a link to download an Excel file. So that has every single indicator. And that is something that we've been putting out there, that you can access this information and use this in Excel if you wanted to look at multiple indicators across multiple years. So Seema, if you scroll down a little bit more, there we go. So those are our data tables. So we have 2010 to 2018 available for download, as well as our old historical data tables all the way back to 2000.
And then of course I completely forgot to mention, or haven't yet gotten to, the fact that all of our data, the vital signs report this year is not that handed out hard copy, but rather is a series of story maps. These are interactive ways for you to interact with the data, but also have the narrative behind why these data are important. What does it mean for a city like ours? What was going on in Baltimore? Every vital signs that comes out is a little bit of a snapshot of what was important in Baltimore that year. So if you look at any one of our stories for any one of our sections, you'll be able to see a little bit of a narrative about why this is so important. Hopefully that's a way to frame kind of that topic. And then you'll see all of our, how the indicators fit into different categories. So like we mentioned, overdose is a new indicator for us this year. So you can just go right into that and you can then see not only the narrative, but also an interactive map behind it. This is new for us this year to have an interactive version of vital signs. So I think after 20 years of this project, one of the things that's important for us all to remember is that it's never the same. it continuously changes, not only because technology gets better, and we hear from our communities about what's important from them. So all of your questions, if we couldn't get to them right now, we will come back and try and answer them for you, because it is meant for us to be in dialogue. It's the dialogue, it's the openness of the data that makes sure that the data is always better. Imagine if we were just doing exactly the same thing as we were doing in 2000. We would be a dinosaur, right? And so in order to stay nimble and be useful and remain effective, we have to be in this dialogue, which is why Baltimore Data Week or Baltimore Data Day, when we normally do it, is so important to us, because we hear from you. This is an entire week actually for all of our staff to learn from all of you. The questions that you have are things that will pique our interest really for the rest of the year. So keep the questions coming, not just now, but on any of our social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we have email. On our website, I will show you how to get to us. Let me just show you that right now. So this is back to our main website. If you do go to the Help Center, you can certainly ask us questions anytime. We do that all the time. People will have, writing a grant. If you're writing a grant for your neighborhood and you really need information, feel free to reach out to us anytime. So Priya has put in the evaluation. So please feel free to do that now if you want. And you're gonna get an evaluation for others. And I will keep answering questions until we get to 2 o'clock. Favorite examples of teachers using the data. It's more, I'm not sure if I can answer this teacher use. It's actually how their students use it. We've had amazing, in some cases, the teachers didn't even send them to us, but the students found us for all kinds of interdisciplinary use of the data. We've had MBA students use our data. We've had journalism students use our data. We've had MICA art and design students using our data. We've had, of course, public policy use our data. And the things that they show us in the data is actually really, really remarkable. If you do look at our learning community, there's places where people have added their own projects. And so if you are a teacher and you do use this information and you have a student that has an amazing project, I hope that they will post it so that students around the region and even around the country can learn about how they're using the data and finding it. Gentrification, hi Janet. Yes, gentrification is a bad word, but if you look at the research for our city, it's not that we only have some neighborhoods where development pressure is so strong, like Locust Point, like Canton, like Patterson Park. And because there isn't development opportunities in other places, those neighborhoods are a feeding frenzy, right, for rent, bidding up rent, because everybody wants to move into those neighborhoods. All developers want to develop in those neighborhoods. And we've got to move beyond that. We've got to make it so that every single one of our neighborhoods is a development opportunity that people, and I don't mean the big development like a Port Covington, I mean normal development, putting in a storefront or rehabilitating a house that might have gone vacant. That's the kind of development that every single one of our neighborhoods needs. But they need those kind of infrastructure related investments that would attract developers to come in. You're only going to invest in a residential property if after the rehabilitation you can sell it for more than what you put in. And people will come to neighborhoods in Baltimore if there's a way to get there, and if it's not too much vacancy, and if it's a connected neighborhood. And those are why those framework, and if other people are moving in, other people will continue to move in. And so that's why that framework is so important, so that all of our neighborhoods have access to people, to capital, to goods, to good knowledge, and resources into the future. Well, I'm going to stop now because we have a whole packed day. I hope you'll join us for our 3 o'clock session with the Federal Reserve and an amazing panel on what COVID-19 means to a neighborhood to a city like ours. And we'll see you throughout this week and maybe even at our virtual happy hour on Friday. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seema.
Thank you.
Thanks, Seema.
Awesome.
So
Sorry.
it looked like we peaked at around 110 is what I saw the last number at. At a later time, and
111.
111, thank you. At a later time, it doesn't have to be right now or whenever. I can show you how to get a report. It'll show you everyone who attended. But other than that, I'll see you at 3 o'clock.
Thanks, Jared.